It's like 1 minute you're cruising along, just looking out the window,
Yeah.
and everything seems normal, and then the next minute,
Yeah.
it's just pure chaos.
Everything changes in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of the reality we're facing with this Potomac River crash.
Sadly, it is a really stark reminder of how things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Even in a system like aviation where safety is supposed to be, the top priority.
Right. Well, and especially given, this happened January 29th. It was right around 9 p.m. when an American Airlines passenger jet
Right.
collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter
Yeah, near Reagan National.
right outside D.C.
Yeah.
Yep. And there were a lot of people on board both of those aircraft.
67 lives.
67 lives.
Yeah.
Just a tremendous tragedy.
And I think what makes this even more heartbreaking is that we know the impact was so severe
Right.
that the mission shifted almost immediately from rescue to recovery.
Yeah, there wasn't any, hope really for finding survivors, which is just awful. And they found, personal belongings, luggage, and
Those kinds of things that really
human cost.
really hits home.
Yeah, just those little details make it so real.
Exactly. As of February 1st, 41 bodies have been recovered,
Wow.
including all 3 soldiers from the Black Hawk.
Okay.
And the divers are facing some very difficult conditions.
Yeah.
Cold water, strong currents
Yeah.
to locate remaining victims and debris.
And they said across multiple debris fields, right?
Yeah, across multiple debris fields, which tells us something about
About the impact.
the severity of the impact.
Yeah.
And finding every piece is absolutely critical to the investigation.
I can see how, if you found the tail section or something like that. But what could a small piece, like a
Right.
piece of metal tell you?
Well, think of it like a detective combing a crime scene.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
looking for every little clue, and what seems insignificant on its own
Right.
might actually be the missing link in understanding the sequence of events.
Oh, so it's all about like the
Everything's connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even something small could help investigators piece together what happened.
Well, that's good because they were able to find both of the black boxes.
Yeah, both from the plane and the helicopter's cockpit voice recorder.
And they said they were in good condition,
They were in good condition,
Yeah.
which is
which is great. But honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on what data would be crucial in a case like this.
well, in this particular case, the helicopter's lack of response to air traffic control
Right.
is a major piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
So investigators will be focusing on any communication from the helicopter crew in those final minutes.
Gotcha.
Engine sounds that could indicate a mechanical issue, and of course the altitude, speed, and trajectory readings
Right.
leading up to the collision.
So it's really about painting a picture of those last minutes.
Exactly, and it's meticulous work.
Yeah.
Drying them out if they're submerged, extracting the data, and painstakingly synchronizing everything to create a timeline.
Wow. So it's almost like digital archaeology in a way.
It's like piecing together a story from these fragments of information.
Yeah.
Like a puzzle.
And like any good detective story, we like to, try to figure out
Right.
what are the potential causes.
Exactly. What might have gone wrong.
Yeah. So what jumps out at you as significant?
Well, one of the most unsettling details is that air traffic controllers did try to warn the helicopter about the approaching jet.
So the pilots did see each other then?
Well, not necessarily. They radioed the helicopter less than 30 seconds before impact,
Okay.
asking if they had the jet in sight, even instructing them to pass behind it.
Oh, wow.
But there was no response from the helicopter whatsoever.
Wow, that's incredibly disturbing. So
Yeah.
what are they looking at that might have prevented the crew from responding?
Well, there are several possibilities.
Okay.
One focus is on the staffing shortage at the time.
Okay.
Instead of the usual 2 controllers managing both helicopter and airplane traffic, there was only one.
Oh, wow. So one person was responsible for.
Yeah, one person was doing the job that's typically done by 2 people.
Wow. In such a busy airspace like Reagan National, that's.
Exactly. It's incredibly demanding.
Yeah.
And that workload alone could have contributed to a delay in communication
Right.
or an inability to effectively manage the situation.
Yeah.
So investigators will be analyzing the controller's actions and communications meticulously to understand if staffing played a role.
Okay, so air traffic control is a big one. What else are they looking into?
Well, technology is another key area.
Okay.
Specifically, the functionality of the jet's traffic alert and collision avoidance system, or TCS.
Okay, so remind me what TCS does.
Sure. So TCS, it's like an extra set of eyes for pilots,
Okay.
constantly scanning for potential collisions.
Gotcha.
If another aircraft gets too close, it issues an alert
Okay.
and even provides instructions to the pilots on how to maneuver to avoid a crash.
So if it was working, shouldn't that have prevented this?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
But there's a crucial detail here. Military helicopters, like the Black Hawk involved, often lack TCAS technology.
Wait, they don't have this system.
No, they often don't.
Why not?
It's a bit complicated, but certain versions of TCS can interfere with military operations.
Oh,
So integration is complex.
I see.
And so investigators will be digging into whether any alternate collision avoidance systems were standard on this Black Hawk
Right.
and how that factored into the events.
That's a disturbing thought that they might not even have that system on board.
Yeah.
So we've got the air traffic control and then the technology. What else?
Well, we can't rule out the human factor.
Of course.
Even with technology and procedures in place,
Right.
pilot error remains a possibility.
So given that we know air traffic control tried to warn them,
Right.
what kind of human error would they be looking at here?
Well, investigators will be looking at things like situational awareness.
Okay.
Were both crews fully aware of each other's presence? Was there a visual obstruction, maybe weather-related, that impaired their visibility?
Right.
They'll also be examining pilot fatigue training records and even psychological factors that can influence decision-making under pressure.
Yeah, it's almost overwhelming to think about all the different things.
It is a complex puzzle.
Yeah.
But while we're focused on the investigation, it's crucial to remember the human cost.
Right.
67 lives, each representing a web of loved ones left behind to grapple with this tragedy.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And the recovery process, too, bringing those families closure,
Right, yeah.
it must just add another layer of difficulty.
It does. The recovery teams deserve immense credit for their dedication working in those frigid waters.
Right.
Battling currents, limited visibility. It's grueling and emotionally taxing work.
And you mentioned earlier they've recovered 41 bodies so far.
Right.
Can you talk about what that process even looks like?
Sure, it's a combination of advanced technology and painstaking human effort.
Okay.
They're using sonar to scan the riverbed divers to physically search the debris fields.
Wow.
And even remotely operated vehicles to access hard-to-reach areas.
Okay.
It's a slow, meticulous process, but they're committed to bringing everyone home.
Yeah, and you talked about how important every piece of debris is to the investigation.
Right.
But what can they actually learn from, a piece of the plane's wing or the helicopter's rotor?
Well, think of the wreckage like a shattered puzzle box.
Okay.
Even though it's broken, the pieces still fit together in a specific way.
Right.
And experts can analyze the damage patterns, the angle of impact, the force involved.
Okay.
All of it helps reconstruct the sequence of events.
So it's not just about, finding the black box and hitting play.
Right.
The wreckage itself is evidence.
Exactly. It's like forensic science for airplanes.
Oh, wow.
A dent in a particular spot might reveal that the helicopter was clipped by the plane's wing.
Oh.
Scorch marks could indicate an engine fire prior to impact.
Right.
Each piece tells a part of the story.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So you've got all these different lines of inquiry happening,
Exactly.
You've got the black box data, you've got the wreckage, you've got to factor in external factors like weather and,
Right.
Air traffic control.
It's about creating a comprehensive picture, a timeline
Right.
that explains not just what happened, but why it happened.
Yeah, and it seems like an immense responsibility as you're immersed in all these details.
Right.
How do you maintain perspective on the human cost of this?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something that stays with me throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
Every piece of wreckage, every data point represents a life lost,
Right.
a family forever changed. It's a heavy weight, but it fuels the commitment to finding answers,
Right.
to preventing this from happening again.
Right. And I think that's a really crucial point for our listeners.
Yeah.
We can get caught up in the how and the why.
Right.
But at the heart of this are 67 individuals.
You're absolutely right. These weren't just passengers and crew members. They were parents, children,
Yeah.
siblings, friends,
Yeah.
each with their own story, their own hopes and dreams. And those stories were abruptly cut short, leaving a void that can never truly be filled.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile life really is.
It is.
As we, continue to look into this investigation, it's important to keep that in mind.
I agree. And as we learn more about what happened in those final moments,
Right.
perhaps we can begin to explore the larger questions.
Yeah.
How do we prevent this from happening again? And how do we honor the memory of those lost by making air travel safer for everyone?
Yeah. Those are questions that are going to take time to fully address.
Yes, they will.
But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the implications of this tragedy.
Okay.
Because, beyond the victims and their families, this could have significant repercussions for the industry as a whole.
Without a doubt, this incident has already triggered a national conversation about air safety
Right.
and raised some tough questions about existing protocols and procedures.
Yeah.
And the outcome of this investigation could lead to substantial changes in how we manage air traffic train pilots and even the technology we rely on in the skies.
Yeah, it makes sense if they identify, systemic failures that contributed to this, then you've got to address those
Exactly.
to prevent it from happening again.
And that could mean sweeping changes across the entire industry.
Yeah, so we're talking about a potential paradigm shift here.
I think that's a fair assessment. This incident has exposed vulnerabilities
Right.
that demand attention.
Yeah.
It's forced us to confront uncomfortable questions about the limitations of our current systems
Right.
and the choices we make when it comes to prioritizing safety.
And that brings up, crucial point for our listeners.
Yes.
We've spent this deep dive exploring the intricacies of this tragedy, but what does it all mean for you?
Well, this isn't just about understanding the mechanics of a single incident.
Okay.
It's about engaging in a broader conversation about the responsibility we all share
Okay.
in ensuring safe skies.
So it's not just about regulations and technology,
Right.
but about individual awareness
Right.
and a collective commitment to safety.
Precisely. We all have a role to play, whether it's staying informed about safety issues, advocating for stricter regulations,
Right.
or simply being mindful travelers who prioritize safety in our own choices.
This deep dive has been really insightful,
Good.
but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah. There's still a lot to unpack.
So where do we go from here?
Well, for starters, we need to stay engaged with the investigation as it unfolds.
Wow.
The NTSB will continue to release updates as they uncover more information,
Right.
and it's our responsibility to pay attention
Yeah.
and hold both individuals and institutions accountable for their actions.
That's a good point. Accountability is essential
It is.
for ensuring that changes happen.
Absolutely. And beyond accountability, we need to foster a culture of continuous improvement in aviation.
Okay.
That means investing in research and development, embracing new technologies,
Right.
and constantly evaluating our procedures to identify potential weaknesses before they turn into tragedies.
So this isn't about, finding a scapegoat and moving on,
Right.
but using this as an opportunity to really, make change.
Exactly. We owe it to the victims, their families,
Right?
and everyone who steps foot on an aircraft to create a safer future for air travel.
Well said. As we conclude this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
Given everything we've learned about this collision and the potential systemic issues,
Right.
what concrete steps can we as individuals and as a society
Right.
take to ensure that tragedies like this become a relic of the past?
It's a question that demands our attention, our critical thinking, and our collective action.
And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Potomac River collision.
Okay.
We hope this has given you a deeper understanding of the tragedy, the ongoing investigation, and the broader implications for aviation safety.
Yes.
Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions,
Right.
and keep striving to make the world a safer place.
Yeah.
It really does feel like we've just scratched the surface here, but we've uncovered a lot of potential problems.
We have. And, concerns about air traffic control have been around for a while.
Right.
There have been reports about staffing shortages, aging technology, and the increasing strain of just more and more air traffic.
Yeah, and this tragedy, as awful as it is, might force some change.
It could be a catalyst for real change.
Yeah, what kind of changes are we talking about? Like, where do we even begin to address these issues?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Identifying the causes is just the first step.
Right,
The real challenge is implementing solutions.
right.
And there are no easy answers, but we can explore some possibilities.
Okay, well, let's start with the staffing shortage.
Okay.
What can be done to attract and retain more qualified controllers?
Well, it's a multifaceted problem.
Yeah.
We need to make the profession more appealing.
Okay.
And that starts with competitive salaries and benefits.
Right.
The training is really rigorous.
Yeah.
And the job itself is incredibly demanding. So the compensation needs to reflect that. We also need to streamline the hiring process and maybe create more incentives for veterans leaving the military with relevant experience.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
What about technology?
Okay.
We talked about TCS earlier.
Right.
How it's often missing from military helicopters.
Right.
Is there any movement toward changing that?
Well, there's definitely been renewed discussion about it
Yep.
since this collision, but it's Complicated.
Oh,
Some argue that equipping military helicopters with TCS could interfere with their operations
okay.
or compromise sensitive military systems.
So it's not as simple as just adding the technology?
No, it's not just plug and play.
Right.
It requires careful consideration of compatibility, potential interference, and, of course, cost.
Right.
But this tragedy may force a reevaluation of those priorities.
Right. Are we putting, cost over safety?
Exactly. Is the risk of a catastrophic collision worth the concerns about cost?
Right.
That's the debate we need to be having.
Yeah. Are there other technological advancements that could help?
Absolutely. There's incredible innovation happening in this field.
Right.
AI-powered collision avoidance systems that can analyze tons of data in real time.
Wow.
Alert pilots to threats even before they're visible.
Okay.
There are drones being developed to monitor airspace for hazards and assist with search and rescue.
So it's like we're constantly trying to stay ahead of these potential problems.
In a way, yes. The key is to invest in these innovations and find ways to integrate them into existing air traffic management systems.
Right. It's not just about having the technology, but using it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So even with the best technology, human error is still a factor.
Of course.
How do we address that?
That's where training comes in.
Okay.
We need to make sure pilots are prepared to handle the most complex situations, especially in congested airspace.
Right.
More simulator training.
Okay.
Greater emphasis on situational awareness.
Okay.
Maybe even specialized training scenarios that focus on preventing midair collisions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's always pilot fatigue.
Right. Fatigue is a factor in so many accidents.
Right. Not just aviation.
Exactly. We need to be realistic about the demands of flying.
Yeah.
And ensure that pilots are getting adequate rest.
Right.
That might involve revisiting duty time regulations, optimizing scheduling practices,
Okay.
and maybe even exploring technologies that can monitor fatigue levels in real time.
So it seems like there's a lot to be done,
There is,
but also a lot of hope for change.
yes, this tragedy has been devastating, but it's also ignited this sense of urgency to be safer,
Right.
to do better.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important message is that safety isn't passive.
Okay.
It requires constant vigilance, a willingness to learn from mistakes, and a commitment to continuous improvement.
Right.
It's a responsibility we all share,
Right.
from the pilots and controllers to the policymakers and the flying public.
I think that's a great point. We all have a role to play.
We do.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful.
Good, I'm glad.
And I hope it inspires our listeners to really think about aviation safety and how we can all contribute to a safer future.
I hope so too. The pursuit of knowledge is never ending.
Right.
And when it comes to safety, there's always room to learn and grow.
Well, that's it for our deep dive today. We hope you found this exploration of the Potomac River collision informative and thought-provoking. And until next time, keep looking up and keep those critical thinking gears turning.